Now let us look at sentences 13 and 14. Saepe absides dantur, sed etiam pugnatur, et multi viri cadunt. Vir uxorem necara, haec virum vult. These are two interesting sentences that do require a close look. Let's begin with sentence 13, and notice that it has three separate verbs: dantur, pugnatur, and cadunt. Dantur and pugnatur are in the passive voice, while cadunt is in the active voice. Notice that you see no by phrase in the part of the sentence with the passive voice verbs. Remember that in Latin, the by phrase starts with a or ab, and then is followed by a noun in the ablative case. Usually that noun in the by phrase will be a person's name or a noun that names a person, like man or king or queen or master or servant. You get the idea. So we are using the passive voice in this sentence in a more anonymous fashion. We don't exactly know who is doing the action, but we want to talk about this action being done and who it's done to, and the fact that the action is done is more important than who is doing the action. There are three short clauses because of the three different verbs that we have. The first clause begins at saepe and ends at dantur because of the sed that we have immediately after dantur. Etiam begins the second clause, and it is my belief that it ends with pugnatur for the simple reason that pugnatur is followed by the word et, a conjunction meaning and then we have another group of words with the third verb. So multi viri cadunt is the last clause in this sentence. The clauses are not long, but the phrasing is unusual to us in English. Let's start with absides. Absides is the nominative plural of abses, hostage, or sometimes it can mean treaty. In this particular clause, I know it's in the nominative plural because I have only this word and the verb to give in the passive voice. The verb give in the passive voice doesn't really have a direct object because the direct object becomes the subject in the passive voice. So we could translate this as hostages are given, or even we could say treaties are given. Perhaps you might loosely translate dantur as made. Etiam is often used to mean also, but I think that here we're going to use a lesser used translation for etiam, which is still. Still. Pugnatur, if you notice, ends with tur, which is a third person singular ending. This is not an error. We are not using a noun as the subject of pugnatur, but instead we are using what the Romans like to often do with passive voice verbs in the third person singular when there is no nominative case noun as the subject, and that is to make it a neuter subject, something that's an it. So still, it is fought. Now that is not a phrasing that we would use in English at all, but what does it mean? Often hostages are given, or often treaties are made, but still it is fought. So when you hear the whole communication, this is a sentence that you sort of have to rephrase to make the best sense in English. You have my permission to do that and come up with the right idea. What is the right idea exactly? Well, let's look at the rest of the thought. Et multi viri cadunt. Multi and viri must stay together because of the fact that they both have the same ending, not just in looks, but in gender, case, and number. They are in the masculine nominative plural. And then we have the verb cadunt, which means fall. Now this isn't fall as in trip and fall. This is fall as in fall in war or in battle. So it carries with it the weight of dying. Many men fall. Often treaties are given or hostages are given, but still it is fought and many men die, or many men fall. When you hear the whole sentence together, you really get a feel for what the author is trying to communicate. The fact that even though treaties are made, they are broken, the war still continues, and men are still dying. And this is problematic. The next sentence has its own challenges because of the fact that Romans love to use verbs distributively. Now, I know you are aware of that property from math class, but you don't often encounter it in a language class, except if you're dealing with Latin. The verb that is used distributively here is vult. Vult is an irregular verb that means wants. This is the third person singular present tense form. Its subject is both wir and haec, because wir uxorem necara vult is the first idea, and the second idea is haec virum necara vult. How do I know that I have to put the necara into the second idea? Because vult, which is want, has to be completed with an infinitive. You want to do something. So we begin this sentence by talking about the wir, vult, necara uxorem. Haec, which is referring to the uxorem, so here you probably want to translate it as she. She, vult, what does she want? Necara virum. This sort of construction where you have to use the vult distributively over both clauses, and you even have to use the necara in both clauses, is something that the Romans really like to do to help create a very compact idea in looks, but in practicality it's a very complex thought that's being expressed. So let's see if you can figure out what that one says. You get your opportunity to try in one of the questions that follows.